cita incluida.
Sí.
Tengo que hacer una metida de pata accidentalmente a propósito, no soy tan buen actor.
Pero vas a hablar en inglés, así que...
Ah, en inglés.
Buenas tardes a todos. Good afternoon, everybody. So today we will continue with this cycle of lectures, and today will be the last lecture by Professor Gregory Chaitin. He will be on metabiology with technical details that he needs to explain about his model. And tomorrow there will be a continuation by Professor Virginia Chaitin, and she will be telling us about the methodological and philosophical aspects and implications of all these type of theories and models. So, my pleasure, please.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you very much. Everybody, I see I didn't succeed in scaring away everyone. I was starting to tell a story of how I almost met Gödel. I was working for IBM in Argentina. I was in my 20s, and I happened to be visiting the United States, and I was visiting the Watson Research Center north of New York, and Princeton is about an hour north of New York, and Princeton is about an hour west of New York. And just at the end of my visit, I thought of calling up Gödel and asking for an appointment, and asking if I could drop in to talk to him in Princeton, the Institute for Advanced Study. And you just open the phone book and you get out the phone number, and I called, and Gödel picked up the phone, and I can fool myself into thinking I remember. He didn't speak very loud, and he had an Austrian accent. He spoke precisely, and I explained that I had a new viewpoint. I said, I'm fascinated by your result. I think about it all the time, and I think I have a new approach based on information based on the Berry paradox. I said that I'd very much like to tell you about to get your reaction. And he said, based on the Berry paradox rather than on the paradox of the liar, is what I said. And he immediately replied, it doesn't matter which paradox he used. But I was prepared for that because he makes that remark in the introduction to his famous 1931 paper. So I said, yes, but this suggests to me an information theoretic viewpoint that I would very much like to tell you about and get your impression, how you feel about it, what you think about it. So he said, okay, well, send me a paper on this subject, and then call me back and we'll see if I give you an appointment. So fortunately I had a paper. It was actually it were the galley proofs of my first published paper on this subject, which fortunately I had. The paper hadn't been published yet, but they had sent me the proofs to correct. So I made a copy and sent it to him, and then I called Gödel back. And he said, I think very interesting, he made a technical comment, which was that it was an absolute notion. The idea of program-science complexity doesn't depend on the axioms. What you can prove depends on your formal system. But complexity, since it depends only on the definition of a computation, doesn't. So he made that technical remark anyway, and he said yes, he gave me an appointment. So you can imagine I was overjoyed. I didn't have a car.
I like your paper. He appreciated something that in order to give you an appointment.
Right. This was already a miracle. So I was overjoyed. And the appointment was supposed to be just a few days before I was supposed to fly back to South America. And it was, I was flying back to South America, I think the weekend of Easter. This was spring already. So the day of the appointment came. I was in my office that they lent me at the Watson Research Center. I had figured out how to take the train from Watson Research Center into New York City and then take another train out to Princeton. You're very familiar with that train. Right, everything was fine. I was in my office about to leave because this takes a few hours to do this. And all of a sudden, I forgot to mention something which was sort of colorful. It had snowed even though it was spring, it had snowed, but nothing serious, not a meter of snow. But there was a little bit of snow. Of course, this would never stop me from... Anyway, I wasn't driving, I was taking the train. So I'm about to leave, and the phone rings. And it wasn't Gödel, it was Gödel's secretary. And she said, Professor Gödel is very careful with his health, and since it snowed, he's not coming into the institute. Therefore, your appointment is canceled. Well, fortunately, the phone call came before I left on this 4-hour train trip, 2 hours in each direction. But it would have been fun to go there anyway, even if I didn't get to see Gödel. So, but the story is more interesting not meeting Gödel, because if you look at Gödel's papers after he died, he never threw away anything. He kept laundry tickets, from Vienna and New York and everything. So it turned out that many people wrote him letters, of course, which he almost never answered. But very often there would be a reply that, in fact, a draft of a reply that his secretary had typed, sitting there without his signature, in the files, never signed and never sent. So it's a sort of a surreal... the story is better if you don't meet him, I think, actually. But I could go on and tell the story that actually afterwards I did visit his home. Years after he died, I went on a pilgrimage to Princeton to visit Gödel's grave, which is easy to find. The cemetery is right there. So, and then I don't remember how I had found out Gödel's address of his home, and I walked by to look at it. And it's a rather modest home because his wife was not the daughter of a university professor. Most university professors in Austria would marry the daughter of a university professor. Well, now it would be another university professor, but in those days it would be the daughter of a university professor. But Gödel hadn't. He had married a woman from a different social class, and she felt more comfortable in a sort of a blue-collar, working-class, Italian stonemason neighborhood. So the house was sort of modest, and I was looking at it when somebody came out and said, "Oh, you're looking at this house." And they were very nice. Instead of calling the police, they invited me in to see the house. And it turned out that a lot of the features of the house were left over from when Gödel lived there. There was a shrine to the Virgin Mary in the garden, like many of the houses had there, which, because that shows the background from which Gödel's wife came. And Gödel, the room where Gödel worked, Gödel was a strange person, of course. Who am I to call someone else strange, right? But he couldn't tolerate any sound. So he had, the room where he worked, he had put in soundproofing. And the soundproofing was like this. It was leather packed with horsehair or something. The door was this thick because the door was like this, and then there was this very thick soundproofing. So they were nice enough to show me around the house. So I never met Gödel, but I was in his home without meeting him. So anyway, so Gödel is an interesting character, and the book that I think is most fun about him actually is in French. It's, as far as I know, it's never been translated into another language. It's a recent book called Le Démon de Gödel, Logique et Folie, Gödel's Demons, Logic and Madness. And it's a very fun book, so I recommend it to you highly. And the easy way to get it is to go to amazon.fr, and you can get it that way. Okay, I've spent too much time telling this anecdote, but it's fun. One shouldn't take these things too seriously. The subject for today is serious business. I love talking about ideas, but every now and then one has to actually make sure that the proof works, especially when you're creating a new field, right? You really want to make sure the machinery functions and that you're not fooling yourself. This is really very necessary. It's like playing the piano. You have to spend time with scales. Then you can play serious music. Okay, so the goal today is those three, to prove those three results. Where are they? They're nearby. It's this. These three estimates. Oops, we're missing a piece. Well, anyway, between n squared and n cubed. It's really n to the 1 plus epsilon, as you put it in your paper so well. to prove these three results. But first, I don't know if you, Professor Martin-Delgado, would like to make just a few remarks about scaling and...
From the physical point of view, I mean, this is, you have a model, which is, you take a definition of what is life, which is DNA, and you disregard other properties, and you define what is a living organism according to a mathematical model, then what is a mutation, and then what is a finite function. So three things, a triplet. And according to that...
You don't want to get up, sir?
No.
Okay. Yes, according to that...
And according to that, you make prediction about three scenarios. And the nice thing about that for a physicist is that you find scaling laws, especially with the cumulative random evolution. And the first two scenarios is the one from that you can compare to the real evolution scenario. So they are extreme cases, but they are naive if you want, but necessary in order to appreciate the finding of a scaling law with a random walk in the landscape of this software. And this is very appealing from the physical point of view, to find scaling laws according to certain model, because it reminds of universality classes. After all, when you talk about the easy model or Heisenberg model, they are toy models, all of them. They are not real